whatever position that you set early, in order to maintain it, you need to have the same points of contact, right? So if my hands are in one place and then I move them somewhere else as I'm trying to unrack a barbell, it's very likely that the weight is going to make me lose positioning. So the theme here really is going to be set your initial conditions early and try to maintain them. What's going on, guys? My name is Noriega. We are here at elitefts. I'm a powerlifter and powerlifting coach of over 10 years, and today we are going to be going over the bench press setup and how to get the most out of your body and out of the bench to press big weight. So over the past 10 years of competing, I've gotten a bit of a reputation as being a bench press technician. And I think this is something that everybody strives for, right? We think about something like a squat where people are going to sort themselves into a different stance, but for the most part, you can't really cheat the lift. But bench press, everyone is trying to figure out, how can I maximize my grip? How can I maximize my arch? And I just wanted to walk through a lot of the different strategies that I've learned to do this, to be able to bench press over 480 pounds in competition at a body weight of 183 pounds. Now, when it comes to the bench press, it differs from the other two lifts in that you have a lot of physical constraints that you're interacting with. So when you have the bar on your back on squatting, that's one constraint, and then your feet on the ground with a deadlift, you're holding the bar, and then your feet are on the ground. But with the bench press, there are so many points of contact, right? You have your hands on the barbell, you have your feet on the floor, you have your upper back on the pad. And because of this, there are a lot of points of contact to take advantage of for leverage, right? Each of these points of contact is going to restrict range of motion. And if you can drive as much tension into each of those points of contact to set your positioning, all the more you're going to be able to hold your positioning, and it's going to allow you to tension yourself into a better arch, which if you can reduce your range of motion and put yourself in a position of better leverage, you're going to be able to press more weight. Now, one of the mistakes that I've seen, and this was basically from the start of my powerlifting career, you go to a lot of meets and you see people putting their feet up on the bench. They look like a spider, sort of contorting themselves into a position. But then the second they get their feet down, their hands where they need to be, and they've unracked, the magnitude of their arch has dropped dramatically. So what I wanted to do today is talk about a few of these constraints and how we can actually get the most out of them and make sure that the positioning that we actually set up during our setup is maintained during the unrack, during the descent, and during the press. So what are our points of contact, right? We mentioned we have our feet on the ground, we have our hands on the barbell, and then we have our upper back on the pad. We could call the butt a constraint, but we're not really pushing through our butt to the pad, right? It's just resting there. So we're gonna talk about the three different constraints here. Now, the first step that I'm going to talk about is the grip. Because like I mentioned, a lot of people will have different ways of setting up on the bench, right? They'll lay down, maybe they'll set their grip super close as they sort of wedge themselves in. Maybe they'll grab onto the rack, right? There's a lot of different options that people will have. But what I would argue is that whatever position that you set early, in order to maintain it, you need to have the same points of contact, right? So if my hands are in one place, and then I move them somewhere else as I'm trying to unrack a barbell, it's very likely that the weight is going to make me lose positioning. So the theme here really is going to be set your initial conditions early and try to maintain them. So if I bench with my index finger on the ring here, as I'm setting up, what I want to do is take my competition grip. And if I set my grip narrower, then I'm going to grip narrower. So what I'm going to do first, when I lay down on the bench, is I am going to set my grip, and I'm actually going to try to wedge the bar into my hands. So one of the things that I see a lot of people make mistakes with bench press is they're so quick to start squeezing the barbell, right? We think about creating tension. Obviously, if we're trying to create as much force as possible, we try to create full body tension. But the issue that arises from this is twofold. The first is that if I immediately start squeezing the barbell, I might not have it actually settled into the part of my hand where I need it to be, right? You can imagine that if I get underneath the barbell and I immediately start squeezing it as hard as I can, and then I go to unrack, it could be in a place where the wrist could start to roll because it's not truly sitting over the joint. So the first thing I want to do is find that part of the hand where if I unracked it, the bar is sort of sitting in this stable valley or this cup position, I would call it. And the second mistake, or the second reason that squeezing the bar straight away isn't necessarily what you want to do, is that if you squeeze straight away, you're not pushing into the barbell, right? Why do we want to push into the bar? Well, if we push into the bar is going to push back into us. So my advice to people when they're setting up is, of course, like I mentioned already, to set their competition grip early, but then two, to actually think about driving this open hand into the barbell. So you can already see, I mean, there's no weight on the bar, but as I'm pushing, the bar is leaving the rack already. So that part of the hand that is the lowest, most stable part of the hand is driving up into the bar. And if I have a wider grip, I'm probably driving out into the barbell. And when I get enough weight on this, I'm going to notice that I feel the bar then pushing the back of my neck harder into the pad. So I guarantee two things with this part of my setup. I guarantee one, that as I'm pushing with this sort of open hand position, that the bar is actually going to settle into the most stable part of the hand that ends up being stacked. And then second, I make sure that one component of my arch and my setup, which is getting tension through the back of the neck, I'm making sure that I'm using the bar weight to my advantage to set that. And then once I've sort of gotten everything in positioning and I'm ready to go, which we'll talk about, then I can sort of squeeze the barbell and focus on that element of the setup. So the next part of the setup that we are going to talk about is the feet. Now, when it comes to foot position, there are a lot of different opinions about this. There are some people who are going to say that you want to have your heels up. I remember when I first started powerlifting, learning from a lot of the old school guys, a lot of people would tuck their feet back as much as they could because that would help them maximize their arch. It also would help them feel like they had enough tension in their quads. And I think one of the technical things that arose out of the tested side of powerlifting is that you had to have your feet down on the ground. So people were trying to find different ways that they could maximize their leg drive with their feet flat. And one of the things that we actually came to realize is that a more forward foot position for a lot of people can actually help them get better leg drive and as a result, a better arch. Now, the reason for this is that when I think about what an arch actually is, right? I'm driving my rib cage and my sternum up and back, right? Almost like I'm trying to point my sternum toward the spotter. And if I'm trying to create that position, I need force going up the chain, right? So what I'm thinking about doing is driving with my legs so that I can put as much weight into the back of my neck, right? I'm opening up this bridge where I get the sternum high and I get all of the weight on my traps and the back of my neck. So in order to do that to the best of my ability and actually maintain it, I need to be able to use my legs, right? Because if I'm purely driving extension from the rib cage, from the sternum, and I'm just trying to hold it with my back muscles, you get 300, 400, 500 pounds on the bar, it's not gonna hold, right? We need bigger, stronger muscles to help accomplish that. So enter the quads. So what we wanna do, and this is my advice to everybody, because it's not gonna be a one size fits all, but you wanna find the foot position where you feel like you can create the most horizontal leg drive possible without slipping. And I say without slipping because obviously if I were to put my feet all the way out here, like, yeah, I could make a ton of leg drive, but my feet are gonna slip and I'm not gonna be able to bench, right? So what I'm thinking about doing is sort of busting my feet through the front of my shoe, and that's gonna light up my quads, and that's going to push me up the bench and help me open up that rib cage. So similar to what I was mentioning about the grip is that we want to set our foot position early as well. So for me, my ideal foot position is usually somewhere right in line with the upright of the bench. Sometimes it varies depending on how high or how low the bench is. When it's a little bit lower, I can put my feet out more. When it's a little bit higher, I can tuck them back. But those are games of centimeters, really. It's not a big difference. And what I'll usually do is I'll have my feet sort of just outside of shoulder width. And as I go to set my grip, what I'm thinking about in conjunction with that driving and that wedging into the bar is I am pushing as hard as I can with my quads. So it's this horizontal push where I'm trying to shear the carpet and bust my feet through the front of my shoe. Now, like I mentioned, if I'm creating that force that way, my body's gonna go this way, right? So as I'm driving into the bar with my hands and pushing through the floor, what happens? My sternum elevates, my rib cage opens up, and now I feel a ton of pressure on the back of my neck. I'm not even trying to unrack. The bar is just already leaving because that's how much force I'm driving down into the pad. All right, so the next step that we're gonna talk about is what I would call the slide. And I know that I mentioned at the beginning of this that we wanna set our initial conditions early and maintain them, right? We talked about the feet being where more or less they should be at the setup as where you want them during the press. Same with your grip. The only caveat I would give to this is your shoulder position, because it will be very difficult for you to provide the max amount of force, the perfect amount of tension, and honestly find your right positioning if you just straight away laid right underneath the barbell, right? It's unlikely. So the force that you create between the hands and the feet will actually help you settle into your ideal position. So what we would do in the slide, as I call it, is we would set our feet, we would set our grip, and you'll notice I'm out in front of the barbell, right? I'm not gonna unrack from here. I would have to pull it out, you know, way too far, right? I want to eventually slide to the point where I am looking right underneath the bar so that I can just use my lats and the pressure of pushing into the pad with my head to bring the bar off the rack. So what I'm going to do in this phase is, as I set my leg drive, as I drive into the bar as well, I am going to slide myself up the pad. So I'm pushing down and backward until it feels like my neck is flattened into the pad and I have compressed myself as much as possible into that starting position. So as I'm sliding up, I'll notice that as I'm providing more leg drive, that gives me the leverage and the strength to actually push harder into the barbell. So as I'm sliding up, I'm feeling more tension build in my hands. And then in response to that, the bar pushes then harder into me. So you can see how all the different points of force application are arriving at one singular point, the back of the neck. The force of the legs drives your weight to the back of the neck. The force of the barbell drives into the back of the neck. And that gives you all the leverage in the world to unrack your 1 rep max. So I'm sliding up, I'm driving myself down into the pad, and then the bar just pops right off. Okay, so this is a key element of not just the slide, but the entirety of the bench press. And what I'm about to say, at the very worst is controversial, at the very least is just counterintuitive, which is that we actually don't want to be thinking about creating as much retraction and tension in the back as we possibly can, especially during the setup. Now, why is this? Well, when we think about retraction and scapular depression, right? They're going to pull the shoulder blades together, they're going to pull the shoulder blades back. And when we think about a bench press, we're like, yeah, I want my rib cage up, I want this tucked back, I want to make sure I'm in this powerful pressing position, which is absolutely true. However, contracting those muscles also does something else, which is that if I create muscle tension around a joint, it restricts that motion, right? Creating too much tension restricts how much mobility we have available to us. And in this part of the setup, right, this portion of the setup, we are trying to create tension and we are successfully doing it with the legs and the grip, but we're also trying to achieve an extreme amount of mobility, right? So what I would actually encourage is thinking more about relaxing the back and letting the leg drive and the grip move the rib cage. Right? So rather than the scapula or the shoulder blades, rather than them pinching around the rib cage, we're moving the rib cage through the shoulder blades. So we don't think about the shoulder blades, but as we're moving the rib cage, the shoulder blades eventually get to the degree of scapular retraction and depression that we need. And you'll find that if I lay down on the bench and I'm thinking about squeezing and pinching everything together, I'll get that initial height, right? I'll get that initial arch and rib cage elevation. But then once I get all that I can get from squeezing those muscles, I'll be stuck there, right? I'll slide up and I'll go to unrack, and this is about all I have. And you could see the distance between me and the barbell. It's reduced, but it's not the best that it can be. Whereas if I'm thinking legs, grip, and relax everything in between, right? I'm creating a bridge. I need the stability on both sides of the bridge, and then I need pliability in the middle. So I'm gonna set my grip, I'm gonna set my legs, I'm gonna slide up, and then you'll notice just how much that range of motion reduces, all from thinking about relaxing the back. So we've talked about every element of the setup, and now's our opportunity to unrack our bench. This is where all of the hard work that we've put in can be completely wiped away if we don't focus on this one thing, which is that as hard as we have been pushing this entire time during our setup is how hard we need to be pushing even as we're unracking and getting the bar out over its starting point. Now, there's a couple reasons for this. The first one is that the barbell is changing the center of mass of the system, right? Obviously, we don't think about center of mass on a bench press in the same way as we do a squat or a deadlift, where we're just on our toes or on our heels. But when we're laying down on the bench, our center of mass is somewhere. And then as we go to bring the barbell out, the center of mass is now moving down toward our feet. And the barbell wants to do what? It wants to staple us. It wants to flatten us out. So we're essentially trying to conserve the center of mass of the entire system as we're bringing the barbell out. So if the bar's coming this way, I need to keep pushing this way. It's not enough to set everything, push as hard as I can, and then say, okay, now I'm good, let me just push the bar out with my arms, right? So we want to make sure that we drive with the legs, wedge the bar in, slide up, and then as we're bringing the bar out, I am going to continue to push with my feet. And that is going to make sure that I get as much of an arch as I can. It's going to make sure I keep that pressure behind the barbell. So I should never feel like I'm losing my neck pressure and that it's falling down toward where the bar is going to. That's the first reason that this is going to be key. The second reason is that if I'm not pushing as hard as I can, I probably won't be able to bring the barbell out to where I need it. So if I simply am just pushing up on the bar and I stop using my legs, I'm going to unrack and the bar is going to stop about here. And I'm going to feel like I need it to come out further in order to touch where I want to, but it feels like it's going to fall on me, right? So when I start pushing with my legs though, that creates this avenue to be able to get more scapular depression. And as you can see with me swinging this bar back and forth, there's really no risk of dropping it on myself. That feels very stable. And the analogy that I usually give is like you have a glass wall coming up from where you touch. And if you can create as much leg drive and as much tension going back, even as you're bringing the bar out, you're going to continue to advance. You're going to continue to advance that glass wall forward. And you'll find that if you push, that bar is now right out over where you need to touch. All right, so the bar is in our hands and now the ball is in our court, right? It's time to descend on the bench press. Now, like I mentioned with unracking the bar, it wants to flatten you out. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that as you descend in a bench press, the closer you get to the chest, the harder it is to manage the barbell. Along the lines of creating that same tension, now I want to talk about the upper back a bit more, because that's something that I've maybe ignored more than the average person when talking about a bench press setup. But now that we have everything set, we have the fullness of that range of motion we were trying to get out of the rib cage, and that's all in position, ready to go. Now I can really focus on creating that tension that we talked about. So what I actually encourage people to do is as they descend, so they've set the degree of scapular retraction and depression needed in order to get their setup. Now that they're descending and they're trying to hold tension with hundreds of pounds on their chest, that's where we can add that stability from squeezing the shoulder blades and pinching the rear delts. So what I encourage people to do as they descend is actually thinking about squeezing the back, both the shoulder blades and the rear delts, to expand that extra little bit up toward the bar and prevent that bar from sort of rolling or folding us in half. The analogy I like to give, and this is from a movie, if any of you watching have seen the movie Hitch, there's a point in the movie where Will Smith is teaching Kevin James how to kiss the girl that he's trying to get to go on a date with him, or get to date him. And he mentions that you never go the full 100, right? You go 90%, and then you wait for the girl to come the other 10%. And I apply this to bench press because what I want people to think about is that as you're descending, imagine that the bar can only go 90%, right? You're only going to descend 90%. In fact, you want to create so much stiffness that it feels like you can't actually make it the other 10%. And then because of that expansion you're getting from squeezing everything on the backside as you go down, the rib cage will meet the bar that other 10%. Because if we're thinking about just slamming into the chest, the bar is going to beat us every single time. So as I set up, we're going to go through it quickly again. Set the feet, set the grip, do the slide, unrack, and now as I'm descending, now I'm squeezing the shoulder blades. Now I'm trying to create all that stiffness. And obviously, not everyone is going to have this magnitude of an arch. You're gonna have to play with the foot position to find the one that makes the leg drive feel the best for you. But I think if you implement all of this stuff, you're going to find that you can create a much stronger arch, an arch that actually lasts on the unrack, and a descent that feels like you have more control at the chest than you ever have before.
All right, this is how I do it. All right.
Okay. So it's cool that you bench with a close grip because I think the majority of people probably are not benching with a crazy, crazy wide grip. One of the things that I had mentioned, right, is that you're wanting to drive into the bar up and out. Now, if you have a closer grip, driving out doesn't really make sense. So when you're setting your grip, I like the way that you're actually setting your hands and that you're not immediately just straight wrist sort of squeezing it and you're, actually trying to create tension through the hands. The one thing I would say though, is that with your setup, right, you kind of pull yourself up and then you go down, pushing into the pad, you're still pretty far out in front of the bar. And as you're going to unrack, there's like this sort of overly tucked position to try to bring it out. And I don't know if you're intentionally trying to, maybe tuck more aggressively during the bench itself. But what I would probably recommend, even with your feet up, right, even if you have your heels up, I think you can still accomplish this, which is that we want to get ourselves sort of directly under the bar as we're unracking. So I would just get back into your setup.
Yeah.
Set your feet. I have no problem with how you're setting your grip because honestly, you don't start creating tension until your hands are where they need to be. So you can do that kind of as you have already been. And then from this position, what I would probably suggest, even though your heels are up, is to just try to, almost like you're doing a leg extension basically. So creating that pressure up the carpet and using that to drive the back of your neck. So pushing with the legs so that you can get as much tension and pressure back here. So slide up, and as you're doing that, keep driving up into the bar as hard as you can. So as much tension, we're basically trying from both points to create that singularity of pressure right on the back of the neck.
Woo. Feel it in my legs.
Yeah, no, it's exhausting for sure.
With the feet further out, I always feel like I'm just gonna blow out like that. And I saw with yours, your feet are almost like that.
The footwear definitely matters. So that's been a funny,
I don't use these.
Yeah, I mean, that's been the funny thing is a lot of us have tried to find, the best shoe for certain things. And the ones that I'm wearing right now are actually called Hyper V's. And funny enough, they're not lifting shoes at all. They were made for Japanese, industrial workers to not slip at work. where risk of death is a serious concern. So if they work for them on, you know, slick truck beds, then they work for bench press. So,
Yeah.
but
Nice.
yep.
All right. Sweet. Can we try the leg thing?
Yeah.
How to have it more like that. So if I'm in my position, I want to tell me kind of like where to put my feet. So I'm normally like this.
Yeah. So if
I want to get to that pushing the floor out, because I always
Yeah.
push down and my heels down, but I want to be able to switch up my feet so it works for a meet.
Perfect.
So like pushing my feet out, kind of like you were doing.
Yep.
I just want to be able to feel that.
What I would say is, to give you the best chance to feel that, would be to start slightly in front of the bench relative to where you want to be on the unrack, right? Because if you're trying to push forward, ideally what happens is there's a little bit of inching your way up the bench, because if I'm applying all that force, then I'm going to end up moving somewhat on the bench. So if you plan on unracking here, maybe set up here and just push until you feel like you're really sliding yourself to the point of, you know, maybe the bar being in line with your eyes.
So my back is actually sliding.
Exactly.
Upper back.
The idea is you should feel like you're creating this longer neck, and you're flattening the back of the neck into the pad from all that force.
Okay. All right. So I'm normally like this.
Yep.
Just kind of slide my feet out
Yep. And just
to my heels.
drive with the quads.
Oops.
Yep. Yeah. See, there it is.
Now, oh man.
And just relax.
My butt is so high off.
Yep. And that's fine, because when you go to bring the bar out and you create that depression, you're going to be able to just sort of settle the butt down. You won't have to plop it down. You won't feel like you have, you know, a ton of restriction, because if you're keeping all of this relaxed, you're going to have more freedom at the hips.
I'll try that again.
Yep. 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 And keep pushing. That's the big thing, is push as long as you can until it gets to where you need it to be.
I definitely feel it. I think I need to work on the bridge technique you talked about, because I'm like trying to brace so hard.
Yeah.
Like when it's a heavier load right here.
What do you think about when you're bracing on bench press?
Trying to fill my stomach inward, not raise the chest.
Interesting.
More like sucking the air in. Almost like if I'm on a squat, because you have a belt, I want to try to suck in a little bit of air, kind of fill out all the sides of it, trying to keep my spine kind of like that. Now I'm bracing so hard for me. Like,
well, let me comment on that, because I'm glad that you brought that up, because I actually think with bench, if you have an arch, so like if you're a flatter bencher, you can, and you know, if you're a flatter bencher, you're wearing a belt, how you brace probably being more similar to a squat or deadlift is appropriate. But I think with bench, bracing is actually, at least as we traditionally do it, a bit counterproductive. So if I'm trying to clamp down, I'm trying to fill up with air and sort of, you know, take this like Valsalva type breath, I'm now undoing what I've been trying to create, right? I'm trying to create extension. I'm trying to expand really the front side of my rib cage and just get my belly up. If I brace, I'm pulling myself back toward neutral.
yeah.
So I think you're probably feeling this sort of internal tug of war where you're like, I'm bracing so hard, but then I'm trying to drive this up.
Yeah.
In reality, when I'm setting up, I'm not bracing at all in the midsection. I'm just relaxed through the back, relaxed through here, and I'm just letting the legs do the work of opening this up. And then as I go to bring the bar out, my brace is much more superficial, right? It's much more of that kind of the opposite of what you do on a squat, where people tell you, no, don't just take a breath in, like actually try to put 360 degrees of pressure. With bench, it's kind of the opposite. With bench, we want to just create that inflation here, and then on the backside, the compression, right? It's almost like, if you ever seen like the meme of like, of Homer Simpson with like the clothespins pulling all his fat behind his back. It's like, we're trying to compress and shrink wrap everything on the backside so that we can inflate and open everything up on the front.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that.
Of course.
Yeah, that was phenomenal.
Oh,
So,
thank you, sir. I appreciate it.